Oh, hi, I'm Uncle Levitt, and welcome to this children's story entitled The Nuzzling Buzzle. Here we go. Now, Mr. and Mrs. Nosepickle were a very handsome couple, but each had a small lump on the end of their nose, like a pickle. They lived in peace and harmony in a small farmhouse, and one spring, Miss Nosepickle bore a son named Bolus. Bolus was born with a fair, round face, brown curly hair, and a tiny button nose, which ended in a lump like a pickle. One day, not soon after, Miss Bolus fell ill. Mrs. Nosepickle, rather, fell ill. Now, since Mr. Nosepickle was busy working all day in the fields, mind you, and Mrs. Nosepickle had to stay in bed, the young couple was forced to send Bolus away to stay with their grandparents. Mr. and Mrs. Nosepickle were very, very lonely and had a missing place in their heart for little Bolus. One day, Mr. Nosepickle was working in the fields and heard the cows mooing something fierce. He rushed over to see what was the matter and spied a large, hungry, furry creature from behind a haystack making a high oom sound or something or other. Now, that kind of thing did not happen every day to a farmer with a nose like a pickle. He studied the creature for a while and then decided to take it home with him and see what Mrs. Nosepickle thought. Well, when the creature saw Miss Nosepickle lying in her sickbed, it scrambled over and began to nuzzle up against her. At first, Miss Nosepickle drew back in fright. But then she felt the softness of the creature's fur and saw its googly little eyes and said, "Well now, if you ain't a little Nuzzling Buzzle." The creature seemed to like the name Nuzzling Buzzle and continued to nuzzle up against Mrs. Nosepickle's cheeks and go oom oom. Each morning the Buzzle tended to Mrs. Nosepickle. The Buzzle fed Miss Nosepickle honey biscuits and sassafras tea from the tippy top of its fuzzy little head. Mrs. Nosepickle took a liking to the Buzzle and fed it apple turnovers, which it greedily enjoyed. Soon, before a snowflake can lay it on your tongue, the creature became part of the family. It helped with the housework and chores as much as a creature with no arms could. Some days, when Mr. Nosepickle would puff on his pipe and read the Sunday paper, the Buzzle would sidle up next to Mrs. Nosepickle and appear to actually read along. Though the Nosepickles came to love the Nuzzling Buzzle, they could not forget their little Bolus, their little tiny Bolus, who had been away from home for oh so long. And it came to be that with the extra help of the Buzzle, things began to improve for the Nosepickles. After a season, even Mr. Nosepickle's health began to strengthen. So, one fine morning, the Nosepickles drove out to their grandparents' house to retrieve their beloved Bolus. The Nuzzling Buzzle rode in the front seat of the station wagon with Mr. Nosepickle. To Mr. Nosepickle's frustration, the creature kept playing with the radio dial. Miss Nosepickle kept telling her husband to slow down. "Slow down!" she cried. "Mr. Nosepickle, you be careful. Lord knows these seatbelts weren't made for no Nuzzling Buzzle." They drove for many miles till they came to a tiny blue house behind a small brook and a tiny footbridge. When the grandparents entered the car, they wheeled out little Bolus in a stroller and met the Nosepickles at the footbridge. When little Bolus spotted the furry creature, he clapped his hands in delight. In turn, the Nuzzling Buzzle stroked the little boy with its messy mop of a head. A few days after the Nosepickles had arrived home, their neighbors, Mr. and Mrs. Pouch, came to welcome the little boy home. Miss Pouch loved to spend her days tending the garden. Mr. Pouch worked for the local newspaper. The Pouches leaned over the baby's crib with the toys and goodies they bought. They always had a soft spot in their hearts for little children. Suddenly, the Pouches clutched their heads in disbelief. "What is that thing behind Bolus?" exclaimed Mrs. Pouch. That ain't nothing but a buzzle." "A buzzle?" responded Mrs. Nosepickle. "What? A buzzle what? What does it do?" cried Mr. Pouch. "Nuzzles, cuddles." Miss Nosepickle found it on the fields one day. It gave quite a scare to the cows. "Astounding, astounding," barked Mr. Pouch. Well, this is the end of part 1 of the Nuzzling Buzzle. Stay tuned for the next part of the story. I've been your host, Mark Levitt. Enjoy the rest of your day.